So how should we set up cardio in the off season? Well, the first question we need to ask ourselves is, why cardio in the off season? I thought our goal was to build muscle. Doesn't cardio actually lead to detrimental effects against muscle hypertrophy and building muscle? The answer is no. But it depends on the extent in which you're doing cardio. So looking at health metrics, it's going to help to support your overall health markers, especially when your body weight starts to climb, but also your food intake starts to climb. So within the gastrointestinal system, we have something called peristalsis, which is involuntary contractions, which allows the food to move from your mouth through to the anus. Generally speaking, when you engage in exercise or physical activity, cardio or steps, steps is a form of cardio, but it's labeled as physical activity. Cardio is planned, it's structured, it's repetitive. It can help with the movement of food and also the absorption as well. Now, physical activity volume appears to have a stronger relationship with long-term health outcomes than intensity alone. So that's where we need to differentiate. Cardio is not going to help you with absorption. Cardio is also not going to help with fat loss or maintaining fat loss, or sort of like maintaining low levels of body fat when you're trying to drive your weight up. Steps will. Steps is low intensity steady state, and it just means that your body activates specific systems in order to break down that stored fat and convert it into a fuel. Generally speaking, physical activity is going to be significantly better for you compared to exercise in the long term, just because it's more sustainable as well. Now, looking at work capacity, cardio is going to improve cardiovascular efficiency. So that's going to reduce the likelihood of you gassing out, just because the heart is stronger. Therefore, it can distribute more blood and oxygenated blood around the body a lot more efficiently. It's going to support your overall training output and your recovery capacity as well. So if you can recover between sets, you are going to progress significantly more compared to if you're gassed out after like a set or two, and then you go into your next set and you lose a couple of reps, then you lose your head and you lose your mentality and you think that you've lost pretty much all of your gains. Energy balance, it helps to regulate energy balance both during high and low food phases of the off season, just because we can offset sort of energy intake with energy expenditure, but also what we talked about in terms of digestion and movement of food. It's going to support your appetite regulation and overall energy flux, just because your cells are craving the food, right? So if you're offsetting it with increasing your energy expenditure, then of course we need to sort of subsidize that and make sure that you're getting enough fuel in as well. Make future transitions into fat loss phases smoother and more controlled, just because you've been consistent and you've got that metabolic change, how your body actually absorbs nutrients, food, but also how you can build muscle and drop body fat with a consistent routine. So the main goal is going to be hypertrophy. Whilst that remains the primary objective, cardio should be used to support your health and your performance without interfering with your recovery or with your adaptation. So this idea that cardio is going to affect your gains, it won't, unless you're running a marathon or climbing Mount Everest every single day. When it's appropriately dosed, it enhances the process, but excessive amounts can actually detract from recovery and also hypertrophy outcomes. So looking at a systematic review and meta-analysis, cycling doesn't actually appear to affect hypertrophy compared to running, which suggests like the modality selection can influence interference effects. So the type of cardio that you do will affect sort of the outcome. So I'd recommend low intensity steady state cardio, things like cycling, high incline treadmill walk, perhaps an elliptical or even the Stairmaster, compared to running, just because running, it's aerobic. Not that low intensity steady state cardio isn't aerobic, but there's differences in heart rate threshold. So your heart rate when you're sort of like maybe doing cycling is anywhere between 80 to 130, 150 BPM. Whereas running, heart rate is elevated significantly, and you do use your aerobic system, and we do break down glycogen and pretty much readily available carbohydrates. So in that sense, that's also going to affect your recovery, because if there's no glycogen in the liver and the muscle, how do you expect your muscles to recover, especially if you've just been focusing on running? Whereas cycling, it might lead to the breakdown of stored fat. Therefore, we use something called gluconeogenesis, which is the breakdown of fat or proteins, specifically fatty acids or amino acids, and then we can convert that into a fuel. HIIT shows similar hypertrophy outcomes compared to no cardio, with interference effects mainly occurring when performed closer to lower body resistance training. So in short, just don't do HIIT near lower body training. You know, if you've got legs on Tuesday, don't be doing HIIT on Monday or at the start of your session before you do your legs on Tuesday. It's as simple as. Concurrent training has a measurable impact on hypertrophy in trained individuals, but not in untrained populations, with interference most evident when performed in the same session, targeting these same muscle groups. So what we're saying there is, looking at different styles of training, you want to be training a muscle group twice per week. You also want to be targeting specific muscle groups twice per week, rather than just saying chest and shoulders, back and biceps, shoulder and core, and then legs, and that's your training program done for that week. Training a muscle group twice per week is going to lead to better outcomes in terms of muscle hypertrophy. Lower body strength performance is more negatively affected when cardio is performed prior to resistance training versus after. In my opinion, you want to put cardio as far away as you possibly can from your resistance training window. The reason being, it will blunt muscle protein synthesis. So if you're resistance training on a Monday, do the cardio on a Tuesday. Don't be doing the cardio before you resistance train, because you deplete, again, liver and muscle glycogen. But also in terms of recovery and fatigue, you're just going to make it a lot more difficult because fatigue will be at an all-time high. Minimal impact on lower body adaptations has been observed in trained males. So whilst potential sex-based differences suggest a great impact in females. So all that means is male lower body adaptations are not as significant. More of the upper body is compared to like females. And that was by Herbert back in 2024. So if you want to check them out, you can do. If you think of like the male anatomy versus sort of the female anatomy, or the skeletal system or the muscular system, females tend to hold sort of a lot of muscle around sort of their glutes, their hamstrings, their quads, sort of their lower body portion, whereas they're quite petite up top. Reverse that to a man, right? But that's not to say you can't build big legs, you know? Again, we could get into the argument of genetics, and we could also get into the argument of training styles, and how you train. But in short, if we actually just take a look at a generalization of, you know, cardio and doing cardio for lower body adaptations compared to males compared to female, I mean, like, in the grand scheme of things, there's minimal impact on lower body adaptations. So do cardio, cycle. It's not going to impact as much as you think. But again, it all comes down to the extent in which you're doing that cardio, and sort of like how intense it is. So how do you actually minimize the interference? Choose low impact modalities. So minimal eccentric loading. You can do cycling, swimming, the elliptical, Stairmaster, high incline treadmill walk. For HIIT, use options like cycling, battle ropes, rowing, or elliptical work. Running and the step mill introduce a higher eccentric portion. So that does increase more muscle damage and recovery demand. A lot of people do the high incline treadmill walk. Am I going to tell you not to do it? No, but from a scientific point of view, you're going to have high eccentric component, even with the Stairmaster as well. So that could affect your recovery demand, especially if you're under fueling. Duration, keep continuous sessions, 20 to 30 minutes max. No more than that. Like, short durations reduce fatigue costs while still providing an aerobic stimulus. And then extended durations are generally unnecessary and may interfere with recovery and performance. So 20 to 30 minutes is going to be the sweet spot as a whole. Proximity to lifting. Separate your cardio from resistance training, 6 to 8 hours. So if you know that you're going to be training after work, do your cardio in the morning. If you know that you train in the morning, do your cardio after work. The best case scenario is actually putting it on another day. So if you train on a Monday, put your cardio on a Tuesday. If you train on Wednesday, put the cardio on a Thursday. Really depends on the frequency in which you're doing cardio as well. If you perform on the same day, cardio should always follow resistance training rather than precede it. But in the grand scheme of things, like time availability is going to be crucial there. You need to do your best that you can. Separate your lower body training sessions and cardio by 24 hours where possible to minimize interference and optimize recovery. Pretty self-explanatory, just because you're going to be taxing your lower body quite frequently. NEAT and steps. NEAT stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Daily activity is a minimal adaptive stressor and impedance for resistance training. Doing a 5 to 10 minute walk before your resistance training, I mean, this is subjective as well. And I guess there's some sort of anecdotal evidence, because you get your heart rate up and you increase the elasticity of your muscle fibers and sort of like reduce joint stiffness as well. That's going to help with your training. But steps around your training window and across the day, there's minimal impact on sort of fatigue. Step count is going to be a proxy for NEAT, and it's the main driver in the off season for energy balance to improve your digestion as well. 10-minute walks after every single meal. So get up, move around, do some chair-based exercises, walk around your living room, walk around your kitchen, walk around the venue that you're at, and just get that food moving rather than it sort of sitting in your gut, because it can help with absorption. If we actually apply that, for most individuals, the baseline is 8 to 10,000 steps per day. That contributes towards a meaningful standard of physical activity, and the guideline is around 150 minutes of moderate activity per week. So how would you break that down? I mean, 10k steps of brisk walking and then 70 minutes of activity per day. Individuals with very active jobs, averaging 13 to 15k plus steps per day, they may not require additional structured cardio in the off season. It comes down to preference if they want to do that. They're preparing for a running event as well. In these cases, remove formal cardio. That can be appropriate due to high energy expenditure and also maintaining sufficient calorie intake. If they're doing a lot of cardio and a lot of steps, and let's say they're eating plus 3,500 calories and they're not gaining weight, well, guess what? It's this energy expenditure, it outweighs energy intake. It's basic thermodynamics. If total daily activity already meets or exceeds cardiovascular and energy expenditure needs, additional cardio volume will be unnecessary. Exactly what I've just said there. Sedentary individuals, they need to be assigned a minimum set target of 8,000 steps per day as a baseline requirement. Those with like low metabolic baseline and low food intake may benefit from gradually increasing step count to raise energy influx, and then cardio can be added alongside steps when additional expenditure is required, but should be adjusted just based on the total activity load and the recovery capacity. Too much, too little, just right. It needs to be just right, and it can be adjusted on a weekly basis. So how do we actually apply cardio? I mean, moderate and vigorous intensity cardio in the off season, 100 to 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio. That's where your heart rate wants to be around 50 to 70% of your max. So in order to calculate your max, take 220 minus your age. That is your maximum heart rate. That's the maximum number of beats your heart can contract per minute. Or 50 to 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity activity where your heart rate is 70 to 85% maximum heart rate. So what could that be the difference? I mean, if we look at the modality as secondary, but the low impact options are going to be incline walking, elliptical, or cycling. Looking at dedicated cardio sessions, it should not exceed resistance training frequency per week. So let's say you're training 4 days per week. Cardio shouldn't be 5 sessions. It should always be matched or less, where you increase the time as well. But individual cardio sessions should not be shorter than 30 minutes. But cardio is best placed on post-training on rest days or separate from resistance training as a whole, at least 8 hours to reduce interference and also optimize your recovery. How do we build it up? 5 to 10 minute increments every single week. So if you're starting at, let's say, 30 minutes, week 2, 35 minutes, week 3, 40 minutes. Really depends if you do need to increase your cardio, or if you're progressing very, very well, guess what? Just keep it at 30 minutes. Leg prioritization splits focus on NEAT, so 8 to 12k steps, and HIIT on upper body days if needed. So if you're training legs twice a week and then you're trying to do 4 cardio sessions because you're training 4 times a week and you're running upper lower, you're going to struggle. You're going to feel taxed. So that's where you really want to focus on low intensity steady state cardio. I guess it's more like moderate intensity steady state cardio as well. I mean, you can use that around 130 to 150 BPM. That can yield some really, really good results. But to be honest, I would just focus on sort of lists, neat exercises, 8 to 12K steps per day, and then HIIT on upper body days. Low volume HIIT sessions. What is it? What is HIIT? High intensity interval training. And it's basically less than 15 minutes for a total bout. So you could be on the battle ropes and you could be giving it your all for 15 minutes and you're going to be 80 to 100% of your maximum heart rate. You're going to do roughly 1 to 10 intervals of 60 to 240 seconds. And then the work to rest ratio is going to be 1 to 2 or 1 to 1. So basically time on versus time off. The modality options, you could have a spin mic, elliptical, rower, battle ropes. I remember doing the battle ropes on top of a skyscraper in Dubai. It was super hot, 40 plus degrees. Wouldn't recommend it. You could also use a sled as well. And the frequency is going to be 2 to 4 sessions per week. Really, really useful tool to sort of like manage body fat levels and also hunger as well. Why should you do it? I mean, Sabag back in 2021 and Ying in 2024 also confirmed that improves cardiac function, increases in left ventricle ejection fraction, and also pathological left ventricular remodeling in heart failure populations. So essentially just strengthens your heart, improves your heart, improves how your heart operates and distributes blood across the body in terms of like left ventricular ejection. Can't even pronounce that word. Improves blood glucose regulation and insulin sensitivity as well, with reductions in hepatic fat. Enhances cardiorespiratory fitness, increases in VO2 max, so the maximum amount of oxygen that you consume. Reduces blood pressure and improves vascular function, so basically reduces like aortic stiffness and also improves your systolic and your diastolic function. In short, systolic and diastolic blood pressure should be anywhere between 120/60 to 80 milligrams of mercury. If we can improve that, great. Your heart is functioning. It can distribute those trains, which we talked about across the body, which have passengers, oxygen, vitamins, minerals, cholesterol, all of our lovely macronutrients as well. Compared to both HIIT and steady state cardio, they do achieve similar health outcomes with less time, total time, and lower overall energy expenditure requirements. So, I mean, like, HIIT is tough. It's 15 minutes, 80 to 100% maximal heart rate, but in the grand scheme of things, you will save time. And time is super, super important. So if you can save that time and you can allocate it towards more HIIT sessions, great, do that. If it's the case that you're feeling taxed from HIIT, then great, do some moderate intensity steady state cardio. Looking at the example, so how do we actually monitor it? We want to look at progressive intensity. So we want to gradually increase the effort and set volume until reaching 4 to 5 sets. Mental focus psychology should be tailored by supporting high intensity efforts. Health optimization, it's basically targeted for those who are doing greater than 13 to 15K steps per day, still want to improve their health markers. Nutritional support, it's applicable for individuals, not just athletes actually, needing high food volume alongside metabolic health benefits. Recovery management, considerations include weekly training volume per body part and overall recovery capacity. And in session structure, cardio could be performed post-training or as a separate dedicated session. I recommend you do it on a day that you're not resisted to training, in my opinion. Strategic selection, use muscle groups for cardio that are different from those being trained in the weight room for that day. I mean, like, to be honest, if you are going to do your low volume HIIT session post workout, if you're training upper body and then you're going to go do battle ropes, you're going to feel taxed. If you're training lower body and then you go do battle ropes, hey, you're not going to feel as taxed because you're using different muscle groups, right?